suddenly began working together on such a large scale.
Warfare was common between Anasazi villages for over 1,000 years. But after a millennium of chronic warfare, it seems to have stopped. The question is why?
This is indeed a strange occurrence. Historic enemies do not just suddenly decide to be friendly, particularly in an area where usable land and food are scarce and hard won. What could have brought about such a radical cultural change?
Well, for one thing, agriculture improved dramatically during the Chaco period. They built an extensive irrigation system that included dams and masonry-lined canals. The irrigation canals fed gardens, and these gardens must have been something to behold. It's been calculated that there could have been 1,000 individual gardens that were farmed along the north side of the canyon.
It's possible that the Anasazi now learned the value of large-scale cooperation. In any event, this huge complex of villages centered at Chaco developed an extensive trade network covering much of the American West and even stretching down into Central America.
We find bison remains where bison did not live in the pueblos, and then we find Pueblo pottery, Anasazi pottery and corn in the Great Plains of Texas.
Could the turnaround be attributed to something as simple as prosperity? Is it possible that war, as a means of acquiring what people needed, was simply no longer necessary?
The Anasazi artisans produced beautifully crafted and decorated pottery. They made exquisite yucca sandals and other garments, and they turned turquoise into the center of their trading network as the most valuable item they owned.
Turquoise became a very valuable and very durable item of symbolic value. The Hopis used turquoise in various ways. In our ancestral homeland, it was mined and used for ceremonial, social, and trade.
About this time, either because of the cultural changes or in spite of them, what had been a largely nomadic people, quick to abandon one site in favor of another, did something inexplicable. They began to build with stone and plaster.
At the same time as they were developing their skills with pottery and turquoise, the Anasazi moved from their underground pit houses and began building above-ground structures made of shaped blocks of stone set with mortar and plastered on the inside.
Pueblo Bonito is just an amazing building. It's just a jewel of Anasazi architecture. It's what we call a great house, and it's probably the largest one ever built north of Mexico. It had over 600 rooms, many associated kivas. Many of us believe that it was used much like a convention center is today. Certainly Pueblo Bonito represents the most sophisticated architecture that was ever built in North America in prehistoric times.
Jetro is the largest great house in Chaco Canyon. It measures over 2,300 square meters of floor area. It began to be constructed in the form we see it today in the 1030s. And that began about 100 years of construction in Chaco Canyon of these great houses. It required as many as 200,000 beams, it's estimated, coming from the west of Chaco Canyon. If you figure 22 miles in a day's travel on foot, it would be 2 to 3 days away that they had to carry these beams. Some of them were very heavy, involving as many as 6 men perhaps to carry them. Others could have been carried by an individual, but still a long way to go. They were cut with a stone axe, as we can tell from the butt ends of them, which have a distinctive chewed-off sort of character to them, and were clearly carried with great care to the canyon.
All of this, of course, indicates an enormous communal effort. History teaches that there are only 2 basic reasons why a people would do that: some perceived self-interest or forced labor. Could it be that some outside force was exerting an influence over the Anasazis?
Well, some believe that a group from central Mexico, possibly the Toltecs, could have established social, political, and economic control in Chaco Canyon. They would have then used terrorism or violence to force indigenous peoples into doing the building, including the roads and the great houses.
Strangely enough, these buildings are aligned along precise astronomical planes. Where did the Anasazi get this kind of knowledge?
The final monumental construction at Pueblo Bonito was precisely aligned with true north. Not only that, Aztec ruins, Salmon ruins, Chaco Canyon, and Casas Grandes are all on the same meridian, longitude 108 degrees. This is most unlikely to happen just by chance. It was almost certainly done as part of some intentional and well-designed plan. Someone involved in Anasazi building had very sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. That's demonstrated by a construction called the Sundagger, which is a very accurate solar and lunar calendar. Some archaeologists believe it was the most advanced calendar in North America.
Why would a society of farmers and hunters go to so much effort to build something that would have so little effect on their survival? Where did they get the technology to do it? And where did they acquire such a sophisticated knowledge of astronomy? Will the answers to these questions help us discover the answer to the mystery of their disappearance?
Now that the scientists and the archaeologists have had their say, it's time for the Hopis to step forward and give the real story. The Hopis are the record keepers of their people, but not only for the Hopis. When the Navajos or Utes or any of the other Indians are around, they pay attention to the Hopi message. According to the Hopi traditions, this is the fourth age of man. The earth has been wiped clean 3 times already. First by fire, then by ice, and then by flood. Kachinas actually represent angels from heaven, and they have had beings from heaven come among their tribe and teach them. They expect the Kachinas to return because 3 times they have returned to the Hopis. Now they expect him any time to return the 4th time. And he gives them instructions each time that he returns of what they haven't had before, that he wants them to remember now in order to go into the day of perfection. The Hopi people believe that they are descendants from the Pleiades, and before that from Lyra, which is the eye of God. It is entirely reasonable to believe that the Kachinas are coming from God, just as they have in the past, to bring new wisdom to the end of the age. Wisdom is related through the shaman in a process involving the kivas. These are the places the shaman would go to do their most sacred work. According to legends, they're built into the earth because of the end of each of the ages of man. The pure in heart went down into the bowels of the earth to be protected by the ant people. Drawings of the ant people are remarkably similar to the gray aliens. Large heads, little stocky bodies, long, spindly fingers. Some of these drawings have the indication of telepathic thought coming from their heads. The Hopis call Pleiadians the true Hukan, meaning those who cling together. There are some who believe certain star chamber petroglyphs show the Anasazi people actually being taken up into spaceships. That seems pretty far out to the modern scientific and even the modern Native American minds. But there are some interesting similarities between the Hopi traditions and the ancient Sumerians, who also had strong extraterrestrial traditions. For example, the Hopi believe the Father Creator is Ka. The Sumerians believe that the Father Essence was Ka. The Hopi believe that the Pahana is the lost brother, who will one day return to assist the Hopi and humankind. The Sumerians would recognize Pahana as an ancestor from heaven who would return.
Perhaps the greatest legacy that the Anasazi leave to us today is their enduring mystery. These are a people that built great structures, roadways extending 50 feet wide, and thrived in the region for hundreds of years, and then they disappeared. And for archaeologists and anthropologists, that is the enduring mystery. Where did they go?
Wars, a drought, enemy invaders, perhaps a new religion. Is it possible the abandonment was a combination of all these things? Could it be that we have found in our modern pueblos the people several generations of archaeologists and anthropologists thought were lost? But even if that part of the mystery is solved, there are still a number of unanswered questions. For example, how is it that several of the pueblos speak languages totally unrelated to one another while still sharing ancient customs? And where are their dead? Of the tens of thousands who lived in this vast area, barely 800 burials have been found. But perhaps the most important question we should be asking ourselves is, are the voices of this ancient culture whispering a warning from their tumultuous past across the centuries to our own often troubling present? Could what happened to them happen to us?